Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Off the Crutch. I'm your host, Travis Davis. Sorry about the past couple weeks. If you noticed, I haven't been uploading any new episodes. I was sick for a little bit, but now I am feeling great and ready to go. Today's conversation is with my guest, Mike Porath, founder and CEO of The Mighty, the world's leading health community. The Mighty is powered by the shared experiences of 3.5 million members whose stories have been shown by Harvard researchers to improve health outcomes as a first of its kind bibliotherapy. Mike's experience raising a daughter with the rare disease, Dup15q syndrome, taught him the impact of community and inspired him to create the company. Mike has become a leading voice for patient-centered healthcare, speaking at events around the world and collaborating with healthcare leaders on a number of initiatives. He serves on the board of directors for the National Organization for Rare Disorders and Dup15q Alliance, the nonprofit that supports people with his daughter's disease. For his work leading The Mighty, Mike was named one of the top 5 Consumer HealthTech Executives in 2021. He was also named one of the world's top 50 philanthropists by Town & Country, which cited the impact The Mighty has had on millions of people. I'm so excited for you all to listen to our conversation, so let's get into it. So Mike, what inspired you to create The Mighty, and how has your journey influenced the platform's development?
Great question. So the Mighty is a health community that reaches millions of people. And what inspired me was I wasn't in the health space or any of that. I was a media guy, but on a personal front, my wife and I have 4 kids, and our oldest was born with a rare disease. It took us a couple of years to get the diagnosis. It's called Dup15q syndrome, but she's profoundly autistic and has a bunch of different types of challenges. And I think in those early days, it being our first kid, that's already an adventure when you have a kid. And then when that kid has challenges that are unique and that's something that you haven't experienced before, you're trying to find all the different ways, in our case, to help her. And we found that a nonprofit group of other parents with kids with the same disorder was really helpful to us in terms of that community we relied on. They were almost like these other parents were like mentors to us in many ways. Like, we had a great medical team around us, but they're not dealing with all the day-to-day challenges the same way other parents are. And so that experience for both my wife and me was great. And that we just saw so much value in relying on or tapping into the life experiences of other people. And so the idea of the Mighty was really like, could we do that across any health issue that anyone was facing? Give them some degree of the stories, the life experiences from others, the ability to reach out and contact people, all of those types of things. So that was really the idea behind building the Mighty. And also, you asked about the platform's development. We started with just stories. We have about 60,000 published stories now from community members. But then we also launched more like social networking features so that people could find each other, communicate. We introduced email, so that was almost like the lifeblood of the community in terms of showing them new posts that people are writing or new content that's come in or other things that we may curate from around the internet that could be helpful to folks based on the health issues or disabilities that they're facing. But it really came from that personal experience of seeing how helpful it was to me and our family and wanting to basically build something that would work like that for anyone.
Did you originally envision The Mighty being a website, or did you have thoughts about creating a newsletter first?
So always thought about it as a website first. The idea was my background was as a journalist. So I was a storyteller, a content guy, and I really believe in the power of stories and how they can alter your thoughts, ideas, experiences, your moods, all of those types of things. And so it was really the cornerstone was content, was personal stories of living through as a patient, a caregiver, just someone with that life experience, and sharing the moments that matter to you, that you got something out of, that you learned something, sharing those with others. And that if that worked, we could encourage people to write more stories, to participate more. And so the idea was always storytelling first, content first, with the idea that if we got that part right, we could then add community features that would allow people to connect and do all those other things. Email wasn't on the radar until we had a lot of people signing up and telling us what health issues or disabilities that they were facing. And then being like, oh, we've got enough here where we could start emailing them with relevant content for them, personalized. And so that kind of came later, just once we had hit a critical mass and the number of people signing up for the platform.
I think that's really great. And from how I'm sure it started to where it is now, what's been some of the biggest challenges in growing the Mighty, and how have you been able to overcome them?
I think when you're building something that, number one, is very purpose driven, meaning like we're on a mission to build something that would really help people. And so there's that. And then we have to build it in a sustainable way, meaning that at some point the costs, we had to pay for all the resources. We initially had investors, but in a startup world, they call this product market fit. Can you build a product that has a market that's out there and get it to a size where like it's become a real thing? And most startups aren't able to actually get to that kind of product market fit. I think when you're building something like the Mighty, anyone who's building something with a real mission, really trying to drive value for people, you end up really having to hit that mark twice, the product market fit. Like the first part, is it actually valuable to people? If you can't get that part right, the rest of it won't really matter. And so we've been able to, over the years, actually work with scientists and researchers at Harvard and other institutions to show that the Mighty actually can improve health outcomes. It makes people more optimistic. It makes them more socially connected. It decreases the rates of suicidal thoughts for people who are prone to those. And we've been able to measure this and show that like the Mighty actually does help people on a day-to-day basis. And so that was the first mark. And then the second is, could we build this into a business where we could actually pay for the resources needed to grow it and reach more people, provide that value to more people? And the first part we got a big check on in terms of, we know that this is really helpful. We got a lot of, anecdotal evidence as well. And the second part we're still working on. We're still getting to that, reaching that point where the Mighty is totally self-sustainable. And we're not quite there yet, but we're much closer than we were in years past. But those were really what we're trying to solve for early on.
Did you see a big uptick in the Mighty's usage during the pandemic or when it first started with the lockdown?
We did. I think that what we noticed in the pandemic was mental health as a category blew up for us. Like everyone was facing a totally different level of isolation than they ever had before. It was forced on all of us in terms of, all of a sudden, like we're all at home and not physically connecting to people, whether it's work, family, friends. For almost everyone, that really curtailed, and people just weren't used to it. And I think that level of isolation was a real challenge for a lot of people. And so we saw our usage grow, and particularly the issues around mental health in any way really overtook everything else that we were doing. So it now mental health makes up about half of all of our content, community members, all that. And the other thing I'd say is, we see a lot of comorbidity of conditions, meaning that like we were able to show a partner working with us in the cancer space that 88% of people who are in our cancer communities are also in either our anxiety or depression communities. And to show them that the mental health aspects of dealing with something like trying to manage your way through cancer, that there's a whole mental health side that's not about the cancer treatments and the recovery. And it's the loneliness. The most popular content we have around cancer is the loneliness of going through it. And during the pandemic, again, we saw this massive spike in kind of the need on solving for isolation, as well as recognizing, I think, for us that no matter what health issues or disabilities you may be facing, there's a mental health angle to it that's actually really important. And we need to be more focused than I think we were on that.
I think that's great. You're definitely right. During the pandemic and when everything was locked down, the loneliness seemed to skyrocket for everybody, especially those with disabilities or other mental health challenges. And I'm sure that the Mighty had really given those individuals a sense of hope. Do you get that a lot from people that have read or contributed to the Mighty?
Yeah, I think so. We attract people who want to take a positive approach or a constructive approach to whatever they happen to be facing. And we named it intentionally the Mighty, almost aspirationally, to show that disease, disability, those don't have to be, they may be challenging, but they don't have to be negative things, right? Like they all start with the DIS, which is just like a negative connotation. And we wanted to flip that on its head. And my wife and I sat down before we built this. And when we were talking about all the experiences that we've had with our daughter, of course, I don't want to minimize how many challenges there are with it, but there's so many beautiful things we've been able to celebrate with her. There's things we never would have, like we live a different life because of her. And there's a lot of amazing things about that life. And we wanted to be able to showcase those as well. So again, getting back to the community, we attract people who are trying to figure out like how to get themselves on a better path. And I think because of that, there's a culture of, it's not just blanket positivity. It's that real acknowledgement of the challenges that someone may be facing, but also let's look for real solutions and how we can help this person or other people in the community. What are those needs? How do we fill those? And so I think that authenticity shines through because we're a community built by and for other community members. And I think that's one of the things that makes it really work.
Speaking of community, can you share a personal story or moment that solidified your mission of making the Mighty and building a community for people facing disabilities or health challenges?
Yeah, it goes back to my daughter, but there was a point when I think she was maybe around 2 years old or so, and we didn't actually have a diagnosis for her, although we knew she was struggling in lots of different ways. And it's a small thing that she wasn't able to do is what they call like the pincher grasp, is when you put your thumb and your index finger together to pick something up, right? A pencil or a cap or whatever it is. And that just didn't come naturally to her. And so we were working on it and it just wasn't clicking for her. And in a moment of frustration, I went to a message board. I think it was a Yahoo message board at the time. This was 15 years ago. And I just put out a question to this small community that I was a part of. And I said, has anyone else dealt with this? Have any ideas? Like, we're really struggling, just trying to get her to be able to pick something up. And literally in 5 minutes, another mom that was halfway around the world was like, yeah, like to find a food that she really likes and put a sock over her hands, a sock on each hand, and cut a hole through the thumb and the finger so that those can be exposed. But those are the only two things that she can use to pick up that food. And I picked out blueberries, which my daughter loves, and just put a bowl out there. And for a month, we worked in that way. We just put a sock over her hand, those two holes, and it worked. And it was just like, who else is going to know what to do and how to do that other than someone who has been through it, right? And who's those same challenges. As great as our doctors were, I wouldn't expect them to know how to tackle this particular problem. But a parent who's gone through it is the perfect person to offer advice, right? And I'm trusting in the goodwill of people, that people do want to share experiences and help each other out. And that was one of those moments that clicked for me. It was like, wow, like the amount of power in just other people with life experiences, again, with health and disabilities. How do you leverage that? Like, how do we make that happen like every second of every day, where someone is getting the value that I got in that, just that quick little chat? But that was, again, a little personal thing that made me just think that there's a really big opportunity to leverage the power of patients and caregivers that are out there.
What advice would you give individuals looking to build supportive online or offline communities?
I think it's really important to know who you're trying to reach. It's possible to build large things that don't really have a kind of just a thread through everything. Who are you really trying to build this for? I think you got to answer that question. And then in terms of how you go out and find people, it's most people, I think, that have built communities that live off of digital, right? The internet, social media, those types of things. They've typically found channels where there's already a lot of people there, and then leverage that channel to bring people over into something else. So in the early days, Facebook was the driving platform for us. We built some Facebook communities. We put content out there, good stories, and those got shared around. So more people joined those communities on Facebook. But at the end of the day, we didn't want to just be a Facebook community. We wanted to have our own culture, our own ways of having people talk with each other, to share information, stories, things like that. And so after getting traction off of the platform, Facebook, it was a matter of then it's building our own and moving people over to it and finding the ways to do that. But I think that process, regardless of what platforms, we wouldn't build it off of Facebook now because it just doesn't have anywhere near the reach in terms of the stories that we put out there. But it's really figuring out who you want to serve, what value you think you can provide them. And then I'd say step two is leveraging a platform that's already out there to gain some momentum and traction. And then the third part is converting those people that you're able to gain traction on another platform with, converting them over to whatever you're building. Or if it's a small thing, keep it on some other platform, right? You don't need to move off of it. But for us, we wanted to build something that was independent of some of those large social media platforms.
Yeah, I think that trying to find community, especially if you feel isolated, can be very tough. And that's, I don't know, have you seen other like-minded communities similar to the Mighty?
So most of them that we see, we don't look at them as competitors. We look at them more as like complementary. Are there ways that we can work with them as partners? Most of the communities we see are based on individual health issues or disabilities, and which is great, built for a very particular person or people that have a very specific shared experience around one thing. And we built the Mighty to be, and we tried to build the Mighty to be inclusive of any health issue or disability that someone may have. And so that's why I think in general, it makes a lot of sense for us to partner with those folks. We can drive more exposure to them. If it's a helpful community, like we'd want to introduce people to it, right? We don't think of it as, well, if they're part of that, they're not going to be part of the Mighty. We're going to continue emailing them every day with all of the things that are out there that could be helpful to them. And if they're getting value out of that from us, they're going to keep coming back to us. But generally, the communities that we see are very specific. It'll be like a community around people with breast cancer or people with MS or people with whatever it is. And we kind of go in and be like, we have some people that are on the Mighty that have this. And so we want to introduce what you guys do to them and vice versa. We'd love if you would share some of our stories that we think would be really valuable to the folks that you already have. And maybe some of them come over and become part of the Mighty. And so that's generally how we've worked with other communities in our space.
Okay. Yeah. I think not viewing them as competitors and, as you mentioned, complementary makes it easier on everybody because I think you want everybody, not just you. I think we all want everybody to thrive and support one another. And I think you're looking at it in a very productive and, yeah, the way that you're looking at it is very, yeah, it's positive and you're not stepping on anybody's toes and vice versa. So I think that's really great. So, how would somebody submit or write an article on the Mighty?
Yeah, so we've got a form on the website where it just says submit a story. And so that people can write about their own experience. And what we're seeing actually more and more of now is rather than submitting a story to us that we may or may not publish and put out there, is that we've got forums for people, groups where you can, without having to publish a whole story, you can just write about what you're dealing with that day or questions you have for other people in the community, more of what is traditionally thought of as UGC, user generated content.
Mhm.
And so we see a lot more people taking part in more of that natural, oh, I don't have to write a long story. I can just say, hey, you just talk about a particular moment or whatever with people in these groups that are like-minded, again, that are in that group because they have personal experience with whatever it is. And so we're seeing a lot more of that. So although people can absolutely still submit stories and we still publish those, we don't require that big of a lift. If you just want to post the way that you might post in a Facebook group or some other place, you can do that on our platform in a safe and supportive way. We have 24/7 moderation where we really keep out any of the, I don't know, just the people that try to shake things up in a negative way or attack
Mhm.
people, whatever. We've got a great moderation team that keeps them at bay.
I think having 24/7 support and moderation is key to any kind of online platform. So having those boundaries in place, I think is a really great thing that you've added? Or I don't know, was that something that you did add, or did it come in the beginning of, okay, we're going to have a lot of folks that are writing content. Do we need to then put some guardrails in place from the very beginning?
Yeah. So when we started just doing the content piece, we didn't have the whole moderation team. When we built the platform to allow people to form their own groups and to share experiences and to more of that user generated content side, that's when we're like, we shouldn't launch that unless we have all the moderation needed to make sure that this is a safe and supportive place for people. Because when you're opening up about things you're dealing with in the healthcare space, that's a totally different type of thing than if you're like a sports fan talking about why you like a team, right?
Yep.
Now you're really being vulnerable talking about your own health issues. And we just felt like if we're encouraging people to do that, we need to make sure that the space that they're doing it in is safe for them and supportive of them. And so we took the opposite approach as a lot of other social platforms that are doing the bare minimum with moderation. We're like, no, moderation should actually be really key to this. And we want people to there might be disagreements, and that's natural and it's fine, but we don't allow people to attack each other. We don't allow people to spam their own. They've got someone will try to go on and be like, go on all of our links and put their diet pills on there or whatever. No, we're not letting you do that. And so we've taken a very proactive approach to moderation, whereas I think a lot of others have really just been like, anything goes. And that may work for other platforms, but for what we're dealing with and that we're encouraging people to open up about really tough things, we just felt like it was so important that it was a safe place for folks.
Yeah, I think that's really smart. And as you mentioned, it's a vulnerable place to be in when you're writing about your personal experiences, posting it online, and not have to worry about trolls or other people.
Yeah,
I think just makes the community safer.
that's the idea. That's what we're trying to do. And I think that once you build that and then the culture that everyone experiences is safe and supportive. And when new people join, they're much more likely to fall in line with how other people are. Whereas I think we're so used to getting on was Twitter, now X and Reddit and some of these places. And it's like the Wild West in terms of comments and just the anger and vitriol. And it's not a it's not a particularly nice place to be.
No.
And I think that, but when you first join the Mighty now and you see the way people respond to each other, all of that, you're much more likely to be like, oh, this is how this works. Right. And I think it was very important for us to, right from the get-go, build that safety and support in there, because now people who join, they just see that this is the natural way it works here. And then they're much more likely to act like others in the community.
When you're looking for a safe place online specifically, you don't want to have to worry about the trolls and such. So, reflecting on your time with the Mighty, what key lessons have you learned about resilience, community, and support?
Yeah, I'd say that I could probably divide them into the professional ones and the personal ones. And the professional ones is when you're, you've got a vision to start something and it doesn't all go like up and to the right. Like everything just works out perfectly, exactly how you plan. It's ups and downs. You may think you're the best thing ever some days. And then you're like, how is this even going to get through today on other days? And sometimes both of those things happen in the same day. Right. And so I do think resilience is a really important aspect of when you're trying to build something, because you're not going to get it all right. And so we've experienced tons of ups and downs, just like anybody else. And I think what's required to get through those ups and downs is resilience and relying again on our community members. And then on a personal front, I think one of my experiences going through this whole process, I'll try to keep this story short, but at one point about a year and a half ago, I live in Los Angeles, and I moved with my daughter to Atlanta to help her in an autism program for kids with severe behavioral issues. And it had gotten to a point at home where we just couldn't keep the three other boys safe, or my daughter safe. She had gotten really aggressive behaviors, which wasn't how she has been through her entire life. had a perfect storm of like COVID, losing all of her therapy services and her routine, puberty, and some medication changes that backfired. So those three things sent her in a tailspin. And long story short, well, it's not that short. We ended up in Atlanta, but that was difficult because my wife and three boys were at home. I was with my daughter, helping her through this program. They're trying to run the Mighty from there. And it was personally pretty draining. And eventually my wife and I swapped roles after about 5 months. We thought we'd only be there they thought 3 to 6 months. Ended up being there for over 10 months. But my wife and I swapped halfway through just because I got burnt out. And so I came back with the boys and she went there with my daughter and wrapped up the program at the end of the year, and which was very helpful, by the way. We're really glad that we did it. But I also think getting through everyone in our family, that was not our most fun year. And I think that we all had to rely on some degree of resilience to get through just a challenging year. For the other kids, they didn't have both mom and dad there for the first time, right? That's not easy for any of them. My wife and I didn't have each other to rely on. It was challenging for everyone, but we were doing it with a really clear purpose of helping my daughter through a very difficult time in her life. But again, resilience was a very big part of that.
I think you've touched on pieces of it during this interview, but what are you most proud of in the Mighty's journey, achievement or milestone?
That's a good question. It's hard to pinpoint any one thing. I would say that it's hard to measure the impact of just the day-to-day experiences that people have with our platform. We see it in pieces. I'd mentioned before research that we had done around suicide with a team at Harvard, and seeing the results of that study and getting into the weeds of all of it, and seeing that like someone's story that was read, it's been read over 1 million times now. It was a letter to folks on, if you're feeling suicidal, why to hold on. And it was from a woman who has been there herself. And it was so empathetic and non-judgmental, like this kind of letter to folks. It's, again, been read over 1 million times. And people that were like Googling, I want to kill myself or I want to end my life, they were finding this story when they were actually typing those terms into Google. And you scroll down and you comment saying, thank you, you saved my life, to the woman who wrote the story. And when you see that whole cycle of why someone would write the story, how someone found the story, and then the impact it had on them, and that's one story and one person, you multiply that by millions of views that we get on all this content every month. And it's just like how many other amazing things have come about by those types of sharing experiences and those experiences resonating with others. That's probably the thing that I'm most proud of. It's, again, hard to know how many times that's happened and all of those little impacts, but I think they've added up to probably some really meaningful things for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think suicide is just probably, I think based off what I've seen, suicide rates have gone extraordinarily high, especially during COVID.
Mhm.
And having a place like the Mighty where that could be like the only way, or that could be the point where somebody's life can get saved or that person can look for help, is really impactful to the Mighty's story and helping others who feel like they're in a similar boat. So I really applaud the work that you've done with the Mighty in building such a strong community base and support system to those who are feeling like they have nowhere to turn.
Yeah, thank you. No, it's going back from day one until now. I think, again, that those impacts are so meaningful to so many people. And the one thing I underestimated was how therapeutic the Mighty would be for people writing the content, right? Like I was envisioning all the help that people would be getting reading it, but we've gotten so much feedback of how therapeutic it is to actually open up and share what people are going through with other like-minded people, with people who will get it, right? Often we have friends and family who love us and want to support us and be empathetic of whatever we're going through. But it's different when you talk with someone who has actually gone through what you might be going through. And they do have those life experiences, and it's a different type of bond and connection. I just think we've helped a lot of people find those other people for them. And yeah, we're definitely proud of that.
That's really great. That's really awesome. Last question. What's next for the Mighty? Are there any new features, initiatives, or partnerships in the pipeline for 2024?
Yeah, I'd say that we started off with storytelling and leveraged that into community and trying to get a lot of the stories that were just on the Mighty in front of other people. And I think that one of the needs that is out there now, there's so much content on the internet and social media sites and all that. And it's really hard to sift through it all. And so I think that a role that the Mighty could play is really a curation, where we've personalized these emails. We send out over 15 million emails a month to community members. And based on what their profiles are, like they're telling us what health issues they may have and things like that. And so we're increasingly getting better and better at personalizing those emails and finding things that are all across the internet on a day-to-day basis that could be helpful to them. They don't have to be on the Mighty. Frankly, we're trying to drive people to them through the Mighty's email, because we think they'll be helpful to folks, and more people would sign up for these newsletters. And so I think that one of our initiatives this year is really becoming best in class in terms of helping people navigate the internet with whatever their health needs are, because there's a lot of good stuff out there, but there's also a ton of crap out there.
Yeah.
So we find the things that are going to be most helpful. And by the way, we're relying on the community for a lot of this. There's AI tools that we can use and things like that. But for a lot of it, it's also asking our community members what's been helpful to them. What are the products and services that have been helpful to them? What are the tips that they've learned along the ways? All of that, those types of things. And so the more that we can gather those and share those in a systematic way, I think the more help we can provide a lot more people.
Great. Is there anything else that you would like to say about the Mighty before we log off?
No, I appreciate you bringing me on and giving people a little bit more sense of what's behind our community. And I would encourage people to sign up and see if it can be helpful for them as well.
Perfect. People can go to themighty.com and check out all the great content that's out there. Maybe submit a story, connect with other like-minded individuals, and just seek support.
Yep, that'd be great.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Mike. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Travis.
Thank you for tuning in to today's show. Follow me on social media at Off the Crutch, or email me at offthecrutch@gmail.com. I would love to hear your comments, questions, or if you want to be on my podcast. Until next time, everybody, take care.